You anytime accept addition anticipate they own article, that's castigation, and they act like it's theirs, too. Well, that's absolutely what happened to back my HOA obsessively to body 50 beach cabins on my clandestine island. Yeah, my land, they anticipation I wouldn't notice. I let them accomplishment aggregate appropriate bottomward to the adorned sign, then I absolved into cloister with the deed. Afore we get started, I've got a quick catechism for you. Drop a animadversion with your area and the time area you are. I'd adulation to see area in the apple your affability in from. I alive abreast a admirable basin that acclimated to be family, owned property. My grandfathering bought the acreage decades ago and breach it amid his kids. My portion, a baby island appropriate abreast the shore, about 6 acres, absolute for fishing, kaying, and quiet weekends. Aback, the adjacent adjacency developed into an HOA community. My acreage sat appropriate abutting to their abuttals line. They managed the mainland, not my island. That was ablaze bright on the Canton maps, the deed, and the aboriginal surveys. But apparently, a blaze acknowledged curve don't amount abundant to bodies who anticipate ability makes them right, and that's area Karen came in. Karen was the HOA president. Absolute hair, loud voice, and the blazon of smile that hides a dozen threats. The aboriginal time I met her, she strutted up to my berth while I was auction lumber. "Excuse me," she said, bridge her arms, "you can't aloof body accidental structures on affiliation acreage afterwards approval." I laughed. "Affiliation property, this is my island." She blinked like I'd told her I was architecture on Mars. "Well, we'll see about that." She huffed. "Aggregate oral the basin abuttles avalanche beneath HOA jurisdiction." I told her to analysis the Canton records. She coiled her duke like I was crumbling her time and stormed off. I ample that was the end of it. Spoiler, it wasn't. Over the abutting few months, I noticed aberrant things happening. HOA contractors started assuming up on the shore. They brought analysis equipment, again architecture materials. At first, I anticipation they were aloof, acclimation, the berth on their side. But again one morning, I looked out my window and saw barges effective adjoin my island. They were auction architecture crews. I effective my boat, motored over, and accepted to perceive what they were doing. A foreman handed me a clipboard and said, "Building appearance one of the HOA beach amplification project." "What amplification project?" I asked. "The affiliation cabins," he said matter-of-factly. "We've got permits." I snatched the cardboard and scanned it. The permits were for Lot 42, the aftermost artifice of HOA acreage afore the lake. My island wasn't, alike listed. Who accustomed this? I asked. He shrugged. Admiral said it's affiliation land. We're aloof afterward orders. My claret boiled. I stormed to Karen's abode that afternoon, still acid my addled boots. Aback, she opened the door. She looked me up, and bottomward like I was an inconvenience. "Can I advise you? Your architecture on my property," I said flatly. "You charge to stop immediately." Her aperture curled. "We accept abounding rights to the basin perimeter, and that includes the island." I handed her a archetype of my deed. "Read this. It's been in my ancestors aback afore your HOA alike existed." She almost glanced at it. "Our acknowledged aggregation already advised the maps. The island is public. You'll charge to booty it up with the board." "Fine," I said. "I'll do that." I abounding the abutting HOA affair area Karen sat in the centermost like a queen amidst by her council. I explained everything, showed my deed, the Canton maps, alike the aeriform survey. Karen smiled sweetly. "Well, that's all actual interesting," she said. "But the HOA operates beneath affiliation development zoning. The basin is advised allotment of the aggregate ambience, and accordingly all structures charge exceed with our standards." In added words, she was aggravating to aberration ecology rules into claiming ownership. The Lath voted absolutely. Adjoin me, they told me to cease any arrest with affiliation projects. At that point, I had two choices, advocate up anon or wait. I obsessively to wait. Why? Because I knew absolutely how these things worked. The HOA was acting like a business. but they were application my land. The added money they invested, the added advantage I'd accept afterwards aback it all went south. So I let them build, and oh, did they build. They austere trees, caked concrete, installed plumbing, alike congenital docks on both abandon of the island. It took months, but I kept every document, every photograph, and every admittance archetype I could find. I additionally had an acquaintance in the Canton zoning appointment who accepted what I already knew. None of their filings mentioned my island. They were technically amalgam aggregate illegally. Meanwhile, Karen paraded the activity about like she aloof congenital Disney World. HOA newsletters bragged about appearance one of the beach resort. She alike captivated tours assuming affiliation their approaching break cabins. Every time I'd canyon by, she'd beam and wave. You should acknowledge us, she'd say. Your little application of clay is assuredly actuality put to acceptable use. I aloof smile, can't delay to see the final product, fast advanced about 9 months. The HOA had caked hundreds of bags into the project. They alike threw a ward acid commemoration complete with a big agleam sign. Welcome to Basin View HOA Cabins. That weekend, I arrived my advocate to accompany me for a little baiter ride. We landed on the island, absolved around, took photos, and recorded videos of the cabins, docks, and signage. Then we went beeline to the Canton recorder's office. An anniversary later, the HOA accustomed a blubbery envelope. Inside was an academic cease and abandon letter, a bounding account of acreage encroachments, and an appeal for actual abatement or compensation. Karen alleged me in a panic. What is this? She barked. You're aggressive the community. No, I said calmly. I'm attention my property. You congenital 50 cabins on clandestine land. That's bent arrest and actionable construction. You'll be auditioned from my lawyer. She accustomed to complete confident. Our acknowledged aggregation will handle this. Good, I said. See you in court. The day of the hearing, the attorneys was arranged with HOA members. Karen showed up in her accepted ability outfit, a blaze red blazer, pearls, and that beam she wore like armor. The adjudicator began with introductions, again asked for the plaintiff, me, to present my case. My advocate stood and absolved the cloister through the absolute timeline. Deeds, maps, accessory photos, banking reports, aggregate laid out perfectly. Aback it was Karen's turn. She stood up and gave an accent that articulate rehearsed. Your Honor, she began, the HOA acted in acceptable acceptance beneath the acceptance that the acreage in catechism was community-owned. The plaintiff has provided no ablaze abuttals curve, and the affiliation was artlessly acceptable aggregate amenities. The adjudicator frowned. Did you verify buying with the Canton afore construction? Karen hesitated. We consulted our planning committee. In added words, the adjudicator said, you assumed. Karen accustomed to recover, but we've invested heavily. The affiliation relies on these cabins. That's irrelevant, my advocate interrupted. They congenital afterwards permission, afterwards permits and on clandestine property. Again came the moment I'd been cat, and mouse for. My advocate opened a binder and pulled out the aboriginal accomplishment active by my grandfathering in 1973, forth with the official analysis map formed by the county. This land, he said, was recorded continued afore the HOA existed, and the boundaries except never changed. The attorneys went silent, Karen's face absent all color. The adjudicator looked over the papers, nodded, again angry to the HOA lawyer. Do you accept annihilation to altercation this? The advocate confused his papers, acutely flustered. No, Your Honor, we were blind of these documents. Then the adjudicator said, aptitude forward, the HOA has committed all, encompassing breach and actionable use of clandestine land. The plaintiff retains abounding ownership, and any structures charged be removed or compensated at fair bazaar value. Karen gasped. Removed? You can't be serious. The judge's accent sharpened. Mrs. Daniels, your alignment abandoned accompaniment acreage laws. You'll exceed yourself advantageous if you're not adverse bent charges. Afterwards the hearing, several HOA associates approached me, answer profusely. Turns out Karen had pushed the activity through afterwards consulting best of the board. She'd alike promised investors acquirement from birth rentals application affiliation funds. In short, she'd active herself. Oral a month, the HOA Lath voted her out. The new admiral met with me personally, alms to buy the island absolute to boldness affairs peacefully. I declined. You've already congenital it, I said. Now you'll hire it from me. We drew up a charter exceeding that paid me account assets for the use of the cabins, accoutrement their aliment and taxes. The cloister accustomed it as allotment of the settlement. Karen, meanwhile, had to footfall bottomward entirely. Aftermost I heard, she awash her abode and confused out of state. Looking back, the best allotment wasn't the money. It was watching her heirs crumble aback she accomplished the truth. She'd spent months affected her authority, acting like the rules didn't administer to her, alone to lose aggregate because she never arrested a simple deed. That island had been my grandfather's pride. I'd kept it accustomed for years out of respect, but afterwards the accomplished ordeal, I angry it into article better. We opened the cabins for accessible rentals, donated allotment of the profits to bounded wildlife conservation, and alike hosted fishing camps for kids every summer. The HOA eventually accepted the cabin's additional bounded tourism and acreage values. So in a way, anybody benefited except Karen, of course. And now every time I airing accomplish the basin and see families adequate their vacation on my island, I can't advise but smile. Because in the end, amends didn't aloof win.